East Podcast, WATP.
Opie might be turning into our friend Aaron Imholt from, of course, the Steel Toe Morning Show.
You seeing a throuple?
Nope. That's not it.
Paul super sticker. My God, this Paul $1.99 every day. You might think to yourself, it's only $1.99 up. No, it starts adding up. If every single person gave me $1.99, oh my God, I'd be a hundredaire. I would make $100. Paul super sticker.
Wouldn't that be great if like every person just chipped in? Like if you chipped in and you chipped in and Dwayne Christian and Allie Drew and Reverend Billy and, you know, everyone just kind of chip in $2. We can make this happen.
Oh my God.
Is there anything else we can do for you, Opie, while we're here?
All right. So let's get into the latest. Apparently, Anthony Cumia is the worst of the worst. He never brings it up, but he finally broke his silence here. And this is a very recent video that he put out on his channel.
A brilliant response by you to Luis Gomez asking about O&A reunion. Thank you, Sean. Look, I think Anthony is, no joke, he's soulless. I think he's a soulless, angry, racist. I really believe that. And that's up to you to decide. I don't care, but that's what I believe. But Anthony is soulless because he spent, he spent pretty much the whole time we were doing the Opie and Anthony show trashing me behind the scenes, trashing me to everybody, trashing me to his girlfriends. He has girlfriends that hate my guts that I've never met.
All right. Couple of insights on this. First off, Anthony's been talking about Opie a lot lately because Opie started up this new channel and he's putting out all this content and doing all this crazy stuff. When you watch Anthony talk about Opie, he's laughing, he's making jokes. He's like, wait, pause it there. I'm backing up. When Opie's talking about Anthony, he's a soulless racist who is the worst person I've ever met in my entire life. It's like, all right, you're just trying to convince people to hate Anthony? Like, this is making you look bad.
Yeah. Going back to the entire time they were doing the show together.
Right. The entire time he was talking behind his back. The fact that Anthony has girlfriends that Opie hasn't met that don't like him is because Anthony's been like, oh my gosh, I should tell you what happened when I was working with this guy. He would do this thing. He would do that thing. So they're just like, oh, what an asshole. It's like, yeah, if I've had experiences with coworkers that didn't go well, I might talk to a loved one about it and they'd get a sense of what the problem was.
And if you've never met them, why do you give a fuck?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Good point.
There's a similar strain here, which is even with Whitney too. They both want to believe that they don't get to be held responsible for their podcasts. He thinks Opie, he gets to have these opinions and these thoughts, and this podcast does not reflect them. I don't know if what you're saying about Anthony is true. All I know is that Anthony cares enough to buy a microphone so I can fucking hear him. He cares enough to not have his laptop be reflected in the window behind so that it's coming back at the audience and we can see the flash of your screen. And I know that he cares enough to not have his ring light hanging like a suggested halo above his head, ruining any even minuscule show prep and quality you're claiming to have. I know he at least cares about his audience that much. So why are you giving us this?
And that is the issue with Opie is that he's always not trying. He wants to succeed, but he doesn't want to ever show that he's trying. Because he even said it. We played the clip recently. He's like, do I wish I had more viewers and wish I was doing better on these platforms? Yeah, I do. It's like, okay, but don't just wish for it. Make some changes. Get some real lights in that room. Set it up so that you're actually sitting in front of the camera like a normal person would be sitting, where there's very little headspace above you. All these like little things that everyone else can pull off. Every other person successful at this can pull these things off, and Opie can't be bothered with it. So then the question of the O&A reunion. Now, this is because on Legion of Skanks, Jim and Anthony were on there, and Luis J. Gomez, who does Skank Fest every year in Vegas, Blind Mike always goes. We should probably go to it this year. Luis always reaches out to Opie and say, hey, why don't we do an Opie and Anthony reunion at Skankfest? because that would be a really cool thing. Get a lot of people to come out.
I heard he was asked about a Opie and Anthony reunion. He said, "Yeah, I would do it." And he said, "Who cares if we don't like each other?" He would do it for the money. He's soulless. Why the hell would I enter into that? To go for a money grab? No. But I have my dignity.
Okay. If you say so.
I'd like to see it.
Now, Opie is doing the same thing that we see Chad do, that we see Aaron do, where, I don't know, someone tells them something happened or what's going on, but they just make shit up. So you just heard Opie say, yeah, Anthony said that he would do an Opie and Anthony reunion just for the money grab involved. So I did a thing. I pulled the clip. This is the discussion that they're referring to on Legion of Skanks from that last weekend.
He was mad at you.
I ask Opie every year if we can get an Opie and Anthony reunion at Skankfest, and he has no interest.
No, but every year he goes, ask again next year.
And by the way, that's a douche thing to do because he wants the attention. I want you to want me. Ask again next year instead of just like, it's never going to happen. Which is what Opie is saying on his show. But then when he's asked, ask again next year. Okay, well, we'll just keep kicking this can down the road. Fine.
It allows him to believe that this lack of audience is his choice. Because there's an instance where he could, but he's choosing not to. Just like
because
here.
of his dignity, man.
Yeah. I'm in control, man.
Yeah.
But if Opie said yes, you would
I don't know if I would do it. Like, I love interacting with Anthony. Like, I have fun with Anthony. Like, I don't care about.
This is also the thing I said when this was this.
Okay, so far you've heard Jim doesn't want to do it, and Anthony agreed with him. All right, but Anthony must later on say that, well, the money's right, we'll do it.
Discussed a couple times now. There was probably a time right after it, and where some of the steam went down, and you guys could have gotten together and maybe put together something that was going to be something. The idea of just let's get the three of you guys in the room to broadcast again. How could that? What's that going to be? It's not going to be good out of the gates. You know what?
Yeah.
It's all the magic's happening, guys.
No one wants to see shock jocks in their 60s.
Put this wiffle ball bat in your pussy.
A lot of shit. No, that they'd still want to see.
You ever get these kids in your lawn? It sucks.
Okay, so they're all saying this is not a good idea to do an Opie and Anthony reunion. That ship has sailed. We don't need to do that. But Opie can go on his show and be like, yeah, Anthony's soulless. He wants to do a reunion just for a big payday. It's like, we just made that up. That's not true at all. And normally no one watches Opie, and so no one calls him on it. He might have to actually start paying attention and making sure what he's saying are not blatant lies.
Does he actually think there was a Cumia fan that was watching his show that heard him say that and is now changing his mind about that? Oh, I didn't realize that. Good point, Opie. Thank you.
Well, this is what Opie's always trying to do. He's always trying to get people to turn on Anthony. He thinks that Anthony controls people's thoughts about him. I mean, he's come out and said that. We've played the clips recently where Opie will go, oh, is that what Anthony is saying? Is that what Anthony's telling you to think about me? It's just like, no, we're just watching you and we think you suck.
Yeah, John does the same thing. They refuse to believe that anybody formed their own opinion and decided not to like this person. Anyone that doesn't like John was turned by Artie or who was then turned by Anthony. It's never his own actions. Opie, it's your actions. It's this actual podcast you're doing right now is why people don't like you.
But and I just want to say, Ant in this clip seems like a jolly old soul, and Opie comes off as soulless, completely soulless, and I don't even believe in souls.
I just watched Jim's new podcast episode with Anthony on. I watched that today, and it's hilarious. Yeah. They take all these callers. They're having a good time. They don't bring up Opie at all. They do an hour-long show.
Why would you have to?
They don't. They're not worried about it. They are two funny guys who were on the radio together for a long time, and still having all this fun, like even on Legion of Skanks, you see it right there. And nobody's going, Anthony's such a piece of shit. He's such a hate-ridden, hateful man. You're just like, play a clip.
I need a little bit more to be convinced. I'm sorry.
All right. So this is Opie talking about how he's just the better person.
He would do an Opie and Anthony reunion knowing what he has done to me? No, there's not enough money in the world to do it. So no. I appreciate you liked my response, Sean. Thank you. That means you're an honest man.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean.
It doesn't mean that.
It definitely does not. Your response is shitty. Ask me again next year. You say that every year.
Yeah, it's called breadcrumbing.
Okay. So when Opie's not going after Anthony, he's going after Jim Norton. And so he uses the super chats, just like he was using a free chat here. He uses the super chats to bring up the subject so that he can go hard at these guys.
Your drunk uncle giving me $20. Why has Jimmy never mentioned Jim and Sam on the other podcast he goes on? Sam saved Jimmy's career. FLOS, that show stinks. Big J did an Uncle Paul ripoff and it didn't land. Why doesn't Jimmy do Uncle Paul anymore? Because he knows finally that it was hurting his career. The stupid company was telling him, this is hurting the show and your career.
Opie's so passionate about Jim's career all of a sudden. Do you like the visual here where he's covered up by the super chat? There's something about this that shows you what Opie really thinks about his worth.
Yeah, he's drowning.
He's drowning. He can barely get his mouth up above the waterline here.
And it really is drowning because why would this podcast be under the comedy section?
I don't know. You're not having fun?
It's a bitter old man ranting about his enemies. But both Opie and John think they're doing comedy podcasts because they kind of contort their voices a little bit. I guess just put it under anger. Put it under politics or
is anger a category? Because we got to update our show.
No shit.
Well, he would do well there, I think, because people would actually get what they're expecting. Especially John, too, when he comes out like, morning, everybody. Oh, my God.
I tuned in. It was angry, but not really that angry.
Yeah. I need it to be a little angrier next time.
Mm-hmm.
So he's talking about this Uncle Paul character. Now, if you're familiar with Opie and Anthony back in the day, you remember.
Who's that old guy over there? Uncle Paul, with the creepy old guy stare. Uncle Paul, now he's coming over here, slowly limping down the hall. It's too late now, 'cause here comes Uncle Paul.
Let me show you how to make a big boy love you.
Now, Uncle Paul is this ridiculous character Jim played that was an old pedophile who was constantly talking about trying to take advantage of young children. Now, the reason why he did this is because it was hilarious. And everyone thought it was very funny. No one thought that he was trying to encourage people to practice pedophilia. No one thought that he was, just doing this because secretly he enjoyed doing it so he could slip into this character
Who's
and
that
get his
character
jollies from it.
From the Who's, Tommy, Uncle Albert, what is it?
Oh, I don't know.
It's a similar crazy uncle you don't want to be alone with. Yeah.
Right. So he even played this character on Inside Amy Schumer on Comedy Central. He even came out and played this character. And he was always great on Opie and Anthony. Everyone loved when Uncle Paul would come out. I mean, they made songs about him and shit like that. But then Opie had children and stopped liking the character. And I think what happened is, because I've heard from other people, that Opie's in-laws in Philadelphia would listen to the show and they wouldn't appreciate this kind of humor and stuff. Like, my daughter married this shock jock and they're laughing about pedophilia or they're talking about black people or, whatever it was. And that's why Opie hated all this stuff, is because he had to answer for it to the in-laws. I think the reason why Jim isn't doing Uncle Paul is because Jim's not on a radio show anymore. I don't know that it would be appropriate for him to just go into. I mean, Uncle Paul never had his own show. It was not like Chip Chipperson or Doug Bell or something like that. But Opie acts like he knows all the answers. He's in their heads. He understands why everyone's doing what they're doing, including this take.
Why doesn't Jimmy mention Jim and Sam on the other podcast? Because Jimmy doesn't give a crap about anybody but himself. He's done with Sam.
Well, he did leave that show, and he talked about this. They were under contract negotiations. He was looking for more money, and then they came back and said, you know what, actually, we're just going to part ways. So it was the decision of the management at SiriusXM to let Jim go. And why would he promote the show now? He's not on it anymore. There is no Jim and Sam show. And how would Opie know whether he's promoting it or not when he's on other podcasts? He's just taking your drunk uncle's word for it. I don't know that I would trust your drunk uncle to have all of the facts on this kind of thing.
How about, Opie, when you write a bit or you write multiple comedy specials and then retire those specials and then create new material, you can decide which bits other people should and shouldn't be doing. Why don't you try that and then see how you feel about it?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's crazy that Opie knows Jim so well. He's just like, well, he's a selfish prick. He's just in it for himself. And that's why he does this thing that he does. Just like, yeah, but Jim also is like friends with all the people he was friends with back when you were in the clique. All the comedians, everyone. Like Jim's gotten involved in like Louis C.K.'s projects. He was on Jay Leno's show for a long time. He's done multiple comedy specials. Ozzy Osbourne has been on his comedy. Like he makes friends and people like Jim. And Opie has none of that. But he likes to be like, yeah, and everyone knows he's selfish. And he tells this story from over 20 years ago to illustrate this point.
You know, all the comedians knew who Jimmy really was, and they would make fun of him. Like when me and Anthony were thrown off the air in 2002, we couldn't do anything for Jim anymore, and he sucked right up to Colin Quinn, and we were all at a roast. And in the old days, when we were all going out in public for public appearances and stuff, it was me and Anthony would sit kind of together, and Jimmy would be right there. And then when we were off the air, all of a sudden we went to one of these roasts. I forget which one. And Jimmy was sucking up to Colin Quinn. And one of the comedians, it might have been Patrice, pointed out the whole thing and roasted me and Anthony, basically saying, oh, look, you know, Opie and Anthony can't do anything for Jim anymore. So look where he's sitting. That's all you need to know right there.
Opie remembers a roast joke from 23 years ago and goes, and that's what the guy really thought about him, too. He said it during a roast to his friend who's also a comedian who was at the show.
He didn't remember which roast it was, but
nope.
He remembered the joke.
He remembers that they called Jim an opportunist. And I'll just point out what's much more likely going on in this scenario is that when he was doing a show every day with Opie and Anthony, they were probably palling around a lot more, and then they got fired and were off the radio for 2 years. And so he's at the Comedy Cellar every night. And so he's palling around with Colin Quinn and his other comics. Like those are his coworkers now. Mm-hmm. So it would make sense that they would be sitting together at an event or something like that. It's just kind of how human nature works.
I think whenever Opie detects that someone around him is more likable than him, which is anybody could be around him.
Yes.
That's what happens. He reacts this way and disguises it as something else. So he's sucking up.
But that was the example he had to come up with. He's just like, yeah, he's an opportunist. He's selfish. And then the example he came up with was from 23 years ago in a time when Opie and Anthony weren't on the radio.
Carl, what I think what people are talking about when they say do the work is not necessarily like, you know, therapy or medication or things. I think it's just simple things like, have you processed the divorce? Or in these cases of John and Opie, you lost your dream gig and you crashed really, really hard and you have to rebuild. Have you ever dealt with that or processed that? And the answer for Opie and for John is clearly no. That's why they're living in the past. That's why the past is so present for them. Like, Jim says something on the third or fourth show, steady gig he's had since then, and you're coming back at him with something from 20 years ago that he doesn't even remember happening. And to you, this defines him. And you think it's going to define him to us too. No, because we've all moved on. Anthony has clearly moved on. You're still in the past and haven't processed any of this stuff. And until you do, none of this is going to work. None of it will.
What's amazing is if you go back to the first few times we reviewed Opie Radio Podcast, he had a very different demeanor at that time. And I think what you're describing is what he went through, because he went 8 months between getting fired and starting a podcast. 8 months, no one heard from Opie. We didn't know what was going on. And then he comes back and he goes, guys, I've been working on myself. I've been seeing this guy, and I'm realizing the issues that I caused that led to all of this. And I was like, wow, this is great. We've never heard anything like this. And that went away so quickly. And now it's completely flipped to 180 to the point where he's blaming everyone else. Not only is he blaming everyone else, he's also taking credit for their success. Anthony learned how to make fun of me because I taught him Jocktober. And the reason why our show works because I was the mastermind who decided to get an HVAC guy and a comedian and have that be the core of this team on the radio. It's just like, holy shit. You're blaming everyone and taking all the credit for any success that you had at the same time. You're right. He needs to do some self-reflection.
Yeah, some people just go to one, AA session or whatever, the meeting, and they hear the buzzwords and they go, okay, I got it. And then they just start using those buzzwords when they talk to people. And until you actually meet a fellow alcoholic who's like, oh, who's your sponsor? How often do you talk to your sponsor? Do you realize, oh, yeah, I'm not doing any of that work at all. I'm just throwing these words around to try and fool
12
people.
steps is great, but 3 steps is good.
It's much
right?
quicker. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be something.
Who are these podcasts?